everyone. Welcome to this presentation on the IOC's Ocean Best Practices System and its broader role in digitizing methodologies and helping share them in emerging digital infrastructures and digital ecosystems. I'm Pier Luigi Buttigieg from the Helmholtz Metadata Collaboration up in Germany, and I'm presenting on behalf of a number of us at the OBPS. One recurring theme that we see in digital systems is that interoperability is not just a question of compatible formats and conventions and standards, but deep interoperability comes from knowing that the things that your data represent are also compatible. So the methods used to generate that data, to curate it, to process it, are all generating data that is representative of comparable things in the world and ways of treating those things. And so that's really the niche that we're talking about here for methodology management and digitization. We have to make sure that those processes are well represented so we can put them into provenance chains in metadata. Indeed, that's a challenge that we identified in a recent Perspective article on methodology digitization and best practice development, that right now it's really hard to do that. And we need to get better as a community about digitizing methods and then associating them with data products and digital entities so we know which ones are comparable, even if everything else is perfect in terms of their metadata profiles. So the OBPS attempts to do this, indeed, to bring together people. It's a socio-technical system. So to bring people together, methods developers, to try to align them, to try to at least identify why things are different and why things are best practices in one scenario and not in another. That then will have a digital representation that can be plugged into provenance archives and other metadata forms out there. Much more to read, of course, at oceanbestpractices.org, but I'll focus here on more of the digital side of the equation. So the current status is quite good as a foundation, and we have some exciting things that we'd like to develop in the future. It's in our strategic plan, and I'll touch on a few of them here. More documentation is available on the website. More visioning and also status reporting on our capabilities are also available in a relatively recent publication in the IEEE journal, on the technical basis of the OBPS. So do check that out if you'd like some more details. Essentially, the Ocean Best Practices is a part of a broader IODE family of systems and services that we're all plugging in via the ODIS, the Ocean Data and Information System, not just for the IODE systems, of course, many other systems are participating too. The niche of the Ocean Best Practices, as said before, it's a place to secure and digitize methodologies so that they can be refined, version controlled, etc., and then shared out into the global data universe using linked data approaches. The system itself is centered on a repository at the middle, just to make sure things are secure and that they don't go anywhere. And once we have that there, they can be richly annotated with metadata and then augmented with natural language processing and semantic search technologies to expose what's in them more effectively so that we can discover who has methods about what. That's the overall goal. There are other components like the peer-reviewed journal to help academic discussion around those methodologies where needed. The long-term archive itself, it's based on DSpace, so fairly standard technology over there. There have been some customizations based on community input about what kind of metadata fields are appropriate, what kind of submission interfaces feel right in order to capture what our communities or the communities that are participating in the OBPS would like to see. And we're very receptive to requests from the user community. We issue DOIs for everything that's archived in there. So again, for the findability clause of the FAIR principles, you have a dereferenceable identifier with some kernel metadata. There's a version control system in the backend to track the evolution of methods and their hopefully eventual convergence into best practices for defined purposes. And further, we then add more rich metadata to the records based on Dublin Core as a standard for documents so that we're interoperable with many other document handling systems, plus some extensions for IOC relevant themes such as the SDGs, the types of methodologies, is it an SOP, is it a best practice, etc., for whom, for when, etc., for which ocean regions it's relevant to, and perhaps which EOVs it pertains to. We are also providing templates that can be archived in the OBPS that are designed to help machine agents mine them a little more effectively. A little more on that later. And also, the archive now supports endorsement or the declaration of endorsement by expert panels or authorities of some kind. We're trialing that out with some of the essential ocean variable panels. And that's important to be able to differentiate methods that have been endorsed by the EOV community from those that are relevant to EOVs, but have not actually gone through any kind of vetting process. That's, again, part of that trust building exercise. There it is. I mean, when you look at a record, you'll see a lot of that expressed in a simple interface. There's your DOIs, your metadata, and of course, licensing files to help the reusability. The document templates themselves that we're offering are, again, helping people meet in the middle with the technology by providing sections where you can have structured metadata for easy extraction and automatic ingest, as well as sections that are earmarked for text mining. So then we know we can extract knowledge from there, structure it, and digitize it. We're hoping to see more of those, and we'll be developing technologies for those purposes. The NLP and semantic search is how we open up the contents of those documents to machines. And it's fairly straightforward. We text mine the documents that come into the OBPS, and we tag them against vocabularies, thesauri, and fully fledged reasoned ontologies too. That's our way of preparing for the future, where more knowledge graph-based approaches and knowledge representation technologies are being brought to bear. That's our foundation. We've only brought a little of that into the user experience, and we plan to then scale that up as we then curate that semantic layer that we have being built in the OBPS. So then we have a combination of vocabularies and thesauri that offer high coverage and high expressivity ontologies that prepare us for more expressive machine activity. So when best practices come in, just to illustrate the process, they're put into the system, they're archived, and then the ontologies and vocabularies are merged into a triple store and then poised for use in a tagging module. The text is ripped out of those documents and tags are produced. And then that is also then offered up to our semantic search interface with an Elasticsearch backend for things that we just didn't catch in the NLP net. Fairly straightforward. The future, since we laid out this foundation to be quite future oriented, the future is actually a lot of augmentation or upgrading of what we have. We've outlined a lot more in our perspective article that I mentioned earlier, so it's worth checking that out in terms of our direction and what we hope to see in the future. But very briefly, it's a question of upgrading the system. So for example, new input streams for not just documents, but also multimedia, Git repositories for code, improved structured documentation, and allowing auto ingest and auto population of metadata. On the ontologies and vocabularies, we plan to expand that stack. So with some of the resources we've seen in this conference, so ASFA, Worms, others, trying to move them into an RDF linked data world so that we can more effectively import them and keep track of updates, and therefore we're more interoperable. Multilingualism is something very important that's been brought up in many user consultations, and we need upgraded NLP, natural language processing routines, to be a bit more accurate when we do our tagging. Again, there's always false positives and false negatives, and we need some attention there. The UX, the user experience, we want to move closer to the actual capabilities of the backend. We have a lot more capability than we express, but that's a user design process, and it'll take a bit of time. And importantly, we want stronger links to Otis and OIH so that we can share things more effectively. And that we will also co-develop those specifications. The future, in a sense, the far future would be the development of much more machine-driven protocols where it's highly structured, easy to parse, and linked out to digital objects, code, AI-driven systems, automated systems that can update the protocols and read them themselves, and more multimedia. And then queries like that you see there will be much more approachable. So natural language queries to support browsing through all of these collections. So really importantly, it can't happen in isolation. We need to link to other services, so methodology management systems or MMSs. The OBPS can't do it alone, and we need to strengthen that interoperability layer, perhaps again through Otis. I mean, Otis has given us a 2-year speed up on our strategy to develop this federation of the methodology management systems. So we're really optimistic about being able to do that. So people hosting methods in their own systems can talk to each other, and we can do federated searches, and of course, back up each other's methodology stores where appropriate, where that's not restricted. That way, we don't lose this very valuable basis of ocean observation. We write more about that in that perspective paper. And the main point is that we need to network this stuff. We need to dissolve these boundaries so that when you search one system, you search all of them. And if one goes down for whatever reason, its knowledge is preserved in others. So concluding thoughts for the future. That network, I'll just reiterate, we need that because when we have provenance metadata, we need to make sure that those provenance changes are solid. The prov specifications are there for this reason. And we need to know that those DOIs will point to something that exists 5, 10, 15, 100 years in the future. We need to think about how we are actually recording methods. The community generating the methodologies also needs to meet technologists in the middle so that we can digitize them more effectively and then bring them into machine systems. And we need more focus on extracting and digitizing the meaning inside those documents. So it's natural language processing, it's semantics, it's a whole range of technologies to help express what's done in there in a way that's more machine readable, eventually going to, let's say, structured workflows that can be read by machines and updated by machines. These already exist. It's a question of mainstreaming them. And also we need to think about specific metadata to inject into these specifications. So when they're shared through things like Otis or other federated systems, we know what the best practice is about, when is it a best practice, why, and for whom. So all of those contextual factors need to be expressed much more effectively than they are now. Right, so that's it. I'll leave it there. Thanks for your attention. I'm looking forward to questions.